Okay. One warrior, two swords. Let's talk about it. So I was listening to it's a podcast called Barrel and Hatchet a while back, and they had a whole podcast called One Warrior, One Sword, which I somewhat agree with, but I also have been playing around with guns for a while and listening to a lot of Nut and Fancy for a while, and listening to fucking Miyamoto Musashi. I listened to The Five Rings on an audiobook last night. 2 hours straight, burned it through, while writing a fucking book on gun fu, basically. Talk about that some other time. Conclusion of this. Musashi is a believer in two swords. Short sword, long sword. Use them both at the same time, one in each hand. My interpretation of this into ar15s is thus. You should have two swords. You should have, a long sword with a scope, and you should have a shorter sword with a red dot. My interpretation of this is pretty much, with no laws, it's a 20-inch kind of SPR build, and like a 14.5 kind of M4 carbine trimmed down to basics kind of thing. Like, here's my thoughts. Basically, I want a gun that I can carry with me everywhere for that second gun, right? I want one gun for everything. I don't want to have 85 million guns. And as such, it needs to be super fucking lightweight. And one of the ways to make it really lightweight and kind of easy to carry in my mind is to make it kind of older school and more CAR-15-ish. So imagine somewhere between like an early M4 and a late CAR-15 with modernized optics on it, with built on a fucking KE arms lower. That's my second sword. That's the Wakizashi or whatever. I thought about it too, there is another AR-15 that is a little bit smaller. We could talk about it too, but that's really a topic for a whole different video. This is two swords, not the exceptional third sword. Maybe talk about it at the end. So, but this is how I see things. Is basically you need an SPR rig, and you need some sort of general red dot PDW 14.5 to 16-inch build. And it's not, in my mind, it's not breaking the one warrior, one sword mindset, really, to have a long sword and a short sword. It's, we're carrying a pair of swords. Yeah, I guess that's a ridiculous way to be, but that's kind of how I'm thinking about this now, is basically like, I'm going to be in a vehicle. So maybe if we get out of vehicles and now we're on foot, probably going to have to make life choices on which sword is best at that point. While you're in a vehicle, though, why not be samurai? Carry two swords. Have the short sword, have the long sword. If you go into a fight that's, shooting rooftop to rooftop, you grab the long sword. You go into a fight that's inside of a fucking, like, schoolhouse or mall or some shit, maybe you grab a short sword. This is very samurai. This is like the way I think our law enforcement should be, at least. This is how I'm going to be with my guns, because I'm going to be in a vehicle. Like, fuck all this walking nonsense. Air fucking cav. That's what I really would like to be. I'd like to get a fucking, like, helicopter. If I got a helicopter, the world would be, like, scared, I think. Anyway, the reasoning behind two swords here is that really these are two separate mission sets that the AR-15 is very good at, and it's better at them if you diverge the two. If you build one sword for everything, you end up with a thing that's good at nothing. Okay? Now, I'm not saying to get ridiculous or whatever, like my SPR build here is really lightweight. And it's going to have a red dot mounted on top soon. And we're going to upgrade scopes and shit. Dude, that's going to be a whole thing. But a scoped AR-15 of some flavor, even if it does have red dots and shit, I would definitely have it to where, like, if this was the thing that you did take, that it was capable of being the one sword. That means it has shit like a red dot on it, too. But at the same time, you need to get that maybe this is totally fucking wrong for anything that you might even remotely be encountering. You know, you can totally do CQB inside of a fucking, like, mini mall or some shit with this thing. It's just, it's not going to be as good as that little red dot lightweight carbine. And this is Musashi's point, is he carries two swords because basically the longsword isn't always good. There are many, many times where he is, you know, inside of a structure or house and is disarmed of his longsword, but can keep his wakizashi. So he knows how to employ and use it. And that's how I think about the red dot carbine. Is that, like, in reality, when it comes to a gunfight, unknown, I don't know the fight I'm going into, I'll take this one. You know, the scoped gun with the longer barrel and bipod and that kind of shit. Because in more situations, outside of buildings, I'd rather have this gun. We're carrying a handgun if it really comes down to going inside of a structure. And this has a red dot on it. And we'll probably have other guys with us with different capabilities. So that's kind of where my thoughts are. But at the same time, I think you can definitely see the logic of, you know, if you're in vehicles and are packing 10,000 pounds of other shit, why not carry a fucking short sword too? Because, like, it is optimal for certain things. Like, honestly, at any gunfight inside of a building, my preferred weapon would probably be some sort of a carbine AR-15 with a red dot. And this is where, you know, I mentioned, hey, there's another AR-15 that doesn't fit into this. I call this one the Shirasei katana, which is, it's the katanas you see that look kind of like canes. They're just a scabbard. There's no guard or anything on them. They're kind of made to be more concealable. And shoot, cat. That's what I'm calling an 11.5-inch build on an aluminum lower with a PDW stock. And the thought there is basically, like, if you need an AR-15 to put under a suit coat, that's what I would get. But that's not what I would get for, you know, most things. That's the Shirasei katana is a perfect name for that gun in my mind. Because, like, whereas the katana, that is the SPR, is something that you could use every day. Shirasei katana is something that you might use every day if you're like some sort of nobleman or something. Like, it's a highfalutin thing to have in a lot of ways. You know, or a very urban thing at the very least. You know, it's the kind of thing you might see some Yakuza carrying, that Shirasei katana. That's the way I like to think about the AR pistol shit that people are doing now. Is like, it's a whole fad or whatever. It'll come and go. I got really into Musashi the other night while I was fucking writing. It was kind of fucking awesome. I kind of, like, I've come up with a whole system of naming my rifles and pistols and shit, and like categorizing things and how I think about things. And I'm kind of going to lay shit out into some roles of shit that, like, it's how I would do things. And during all of this, I also found out that Hojitsu is the name of Japanese gunnery, or samurai gunnery. So, like, that's what I'm calling my shit from now on. Welcome to fucking Hojitsu class, motherfucker. Gun fu. But, like, there is some of this where, like, the level of study that the samurai had of their art is admirable. And I think we should aspire to that level of mastery. And some of this is, figuring out your swords, basically. And I've been working on this for fucking ever, basically. And, like, the question in my mind was, is there anything better than the ar15? Number one. And how do we make this rifle lighter without losing any performance? Is there any way of doing that? What optics should we run? There's various questions that I've been obsessing over for the last 20 years. I would like to fucking, put that into some videos and a book. I'm working on the notes for the book. That's going to be dope. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with that. I might just throw it on Amazon. But I want to make a contribution to this, or whatever, and I've been like a contribution to the world of guns, that is, and like I've been toying around with this like idea of writing a book on civilian self-defense in the 21st century, and I think this is the way. I'm gonna write like a treatise on Hojitsu in Tulsa in the 21st century. Like, this is what we do. This is what I do. That's kind of like what, if you read Musashi's The Five Rings, it's not about his swordsmanship. It's about, like, everything else. But that was the point of the fucking book was, this is what I do. What everyone else does is wrong. Now I'm going to go die. Fuck you all. It's really kind of great. It's very James Yeager. Like, if you want to get Miyamoto Musashi, you should go study James Yeager's shit, because, like, he was a big fanboy of his, obviously. Like, I already kind of knew that, but I never really got into Musashi that much. Like, I had never had an audio book of it, I guess. It wasn't my bag. Believe it or not, I am not really that big of a fucking katana weeb. I, like, knew who Musashi was, and I'd fucking read most of the fucking Book of the Five Rings. It's one of those, like, I don't know, it drags on somewhere in the middle. But it made a good thing to have playing in the background while writing this shit. I've been thinking about Hojitsu for a couple of days now. I think it really is, that is what we should call this shit. Like, to distinguish ourselves from those who do not follow the way. Hojitsu implies that we are, like, a part of, like, the MMA jiu-jitsu kind of shit, but with guns. And, like, I would like my shit to be a part of that. Like, it is fighting. And, like, the MMA people have stuff that is worth knowing and worth learning. Okay? So do the HEMA people, so do other people. Like, this is why I watch so much shit on, like, martial arts I never intend to take part in. I find the things said by the martial artists to be fascinating. And especially when they're talking about training or generalized things that can apply to anything. Like, they're less interesting when they're like talking about, this length of bow staff versus that length of bow staff is better at bow staffing because bow staffing and, nunchucks are cool. I get it. That those guys can get a little annoying. If you weed through those people, there's actual people that are worth taking a minute or two to listen to. Anyway, it's hard to apply a lot of that shit to guns. But I am going to start writing this book and doing these videos and shit, and then Blazer is going to take and like give me notes and edit this book, I think. And then I'm going to take another stab at it, and then maybe he'll do that again. I think we're going to bounce back and forth like this for a while. It's like he and I are kind of on the same page on this. And I knew when I was writing this that like he would fall in love with this whole idea. I'm in love with this idea. Like, this is what we've needed for a while. It's like no one teaches this. Like James Yeager kind of got there a little bit. It's like he was teaching us in a school, though, like he was charging you money to come and learn this stuff, which is good. But like, I think that while that is a way, that is not the way. That's, we need to set this up as a thing that like is self-perpetuating and is like copied and mimicked, and people like take and make their own. Like karate or jiu-jitsu. And that's why I'd like to call it hojutsu. I think that's what it's called. Hojutsu? Something like that. I think it's hojutsu. It's a badass name, right? Like, thank you fucking ancient samurai gods for giving us a badass name for our fucking gun fu martial art. It's gonna be badass. It's one of those things that like, it would be dope to have it really published in like a hardback version or whatever. I would love to see like the Forgotten Weapons book. Like, I would love to have a book that was that nice that I had written. I don't know if he would publish this shit or not, but like, he would like it if he read it, more than likely. At least find it interesting. That may be a legit option as, this gets to be more of a thing that we've gotten more of it written. I wrote for like 2 hours last night, just kind of writing notes and writing intros and snippets of things and whatever. And like, the intro I wrote for how to shoot, the section on how to shoot is pretty good. It basically says if you thought that this book was a book about guns, you were wrong, because it's a book about like you. I intend to write chapters on like a lot of basic shooting fundamentals, and from a perspective that a lot of people don't have. It's gonna be a good book. Shit that I really don't want to like hint at here or whatever, because I'm going to have to like sit and think about what I want to say. And I'm going to very carefully say it. And I'm going to say it once in writing. And like, that's how I really should be with everything, instead of just getting fucking high and ranting on the internet. But it's my process, I guess. Like, I'm a Hunter Thompson fan. Pretty hardcore, actually. And that informs much of what I do. Much as in the same way that James Yeager was a Musashi fan, and he informed much of what he did. I'm a fan of them both. They're both loner weirdos who are armed to the teeth and died living exactly how they fucking lived. James Jager too. Times three. Like, this is the way. Fucking society will do whatever it does. It continues to do it. It was doing it when Musashi was fucking alive 400 years ago. Hunter Thompson's rolling in his grave right now about a billion things. I intend to create this study of the gun and a martial arts kind of aspect. And like, I don't know. This is like hey, I don't know nothing about guns. What book should I buy about how I should be about guns? I want to be the book people recommend. And like, there's going to be entire chapters about like self-coaching and self-training and, doing all of this shit yourself. And like, this is stuff that Blazer and I are particularly good at. And like, a lot of it's going to be, hey, you need to find someone else who wants to do this. And you need to coach each other. Because like, that's really the best way if you don't have money. Is, both of you know what you're trying to accomplish. Right? And especially if you have a book teaching you forms and stances and whatever. Like, we're going to cover a lot of that. Kind of take like some useful shit from everywhere. Cover everything from like the standing, which is like, that's one of those things like people don't know how to shoot standing. There's like 8 different ways that I know of to do it, and like the one that I use the most is the one that people say not to do, at least in competition shooting and whatever. In competition shooting, when you stand, you use bone structure to hold up the gun, right? So I have this hand turned under like this, and it's resting on this, which is resting on my leg, which supports the gun, right? What I usually do is drive the gun. I just muscle it into position. This is the difference between combat shooting and shooting in fucking competition. I really can't afford to fucking use bone structure and shit. However, I know how to shoot like that. The reason I know how to shoot like that is because basically, if I had to take an offhand shot really far away for some reason, you might see me in the middle of combat drop into an Olympic stance and fucking shoot that way for one shot and then keep moving. This is where like having fucking the 2-sword thing in your repertoire, it might impress somebody at some point, or it might save your life. Who knows? I hope somebody got something out of this. Blazer, tell me what you think. See you guys later.